Welcome to the Next Class 2.0 with host Rob Birdsell, Kent Hickey, and Erin Barisano. Join us as we discuss the latest trends and innovations shaping education.
Hello and welcome to the Next Class. I'm Rob Birdsell, your host, joined by my co-host Erin Barisano. Erin, how are you?
I'm doing great, Rob. How are you doing today?
Good. For our listeners, we're recording this on January 5th. For many school people, their first day back. And did you have a nice break, Erin?
I did. It was very uneventful, which was a very welcome change for me. I feel like usually break we try to squeeze too much in, but kind of laid low, no traveling this year, and spent a lot of time with friends. So it was fun. How about you? Did you have your family in town?
We did. All the girls were home, and
Nice.
my father-in-law and a couple friends. So it was wonderful. And New Year's, we had an amazing night. We walked to a restaurant, which we've never been able to do on New Year's Eve. And we've gotten to know the staff, and they were just welcoming. We walked in, and they had 2 seats at the bar set up for us. And
Oh my gosh, how fun!
it was great. And to walk home and watch some football, New Year's is great. But here we are, January 5th, and looking forward to this conversation with Steve Cheeseman. And tell me a little bit about Steve.
Yeah, so Steve, he's a seasoned Catholic educational leader. He's held a variety of roles. He's been an associate superintendent, a superintendent, and currently he is the CEO and president of the NCEA, the National Catholic Education Association. And I think he's had that role since August 2024, so just about a year and a half now.
Great. Well, we look forward to the conversation with Steve Cheeseman, and we will welcome him in right now.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us today, and we're so happy to have Dr. Steve Cheeseman as our guest on our podcast. And Steve, you've been with NCEA now for how long?
A little over a year and a few months.
Okay. Okay. Great. And maybe you can just give us a little bit of insight into your educational journey. I know that you have a ton of experience in educational leadership. What initially drew you into Catholic educational leadership?
Well, into leadership, it's one of those things where you kind of get called up to do something. And I was a teacher in a Catholic senior high school. I was asked to become a department chair to coordinate the middle school as part of our school as it grew. From there, I went on to become an assistant principal in another school. And then it was actually a public middle school where I was for a little bit. And then I came back to the school I was in, the Catholic high school, to become principal.
Okay.
And I was there for about 9 years and very happy. Probably never would have left, except my superintendent wanted me to come to the office and didn't take no for an answer. So I ended up becoming an associate superintendent in the Diocese of Rockville Center, and then superintendent of Bridgeport. And again, was quite happy where I was. And then all of a sudden, this sort of popped up, the opportunity at NCEA, and I just saw it as a great opportunity to sort of look at things a little differently and take the work that I've done and what I've seen and bring that to the national level. And I knew there was a lot of people doing some great work out there, and having that opportunity to sort of shine the light on that was something I was excited about.
That's great. And Steve, I think I've heard from many people you've been traveling the country this first year, and a lot of people that I've talked to have appreciated you coming to their schools and their dioceses. What are a couple things that stood out on your tour this first year as you were out meeting school leaders in their schools?
Yeah, I think what really surprised me was the tremendous excitement and hope that people have. I use those words a lot because, to describe my visits, because I knew that post COVID, post pandemic, that many schools were doing well. And so I knew it was sort of a more hopeful time to be in Catholic schools. But what really impressed me as I've traveled around is how people are taking advantage of that opportunity that's been given to them, and sort of this reboot of Catholic schools, and reimagining of what could be, and not just taking it for granted. It would be very easy to say, "Hey, we got all these new kids." Because we were open. But most schools didn't do that I've come across. They really have stayed true to mission, and in many cases doubled down on that mission, to ensure that as they're taking new students in, that they're a fit for the school. And they looked at it as an opportunity to really grow, and really, move from that sort of scarcity mindset to more of a mindset of growth. And while I saw that locally, I was surprised to see it so sort of globally, as I traveled around the nation. That people weren't just sitting back and saying, "Oh, enrollment's up, we're good, we don't need to worry about it." And I really did it. I did these trips when I first started, and I've decided to continue to do them, not to the same extent I did my first year, but really to learn what was out there and to see what the needs were, and to see how we could better serve people in ministry and Catholic education. And I think the other thing that surprised me is how similar the challenges are. They may manifest themselves differently depending on the population being served, or the particular financial challenges of a region. But at the end of the day, they're really many of the same challenges that I faced in the East Coast, that people are facing in the West Coast, or down south.
And,
Yeah.
and what are some
We
of those? What are some of those challenges? Sorry, Aaron.
No, go ahead.
Steve, as you mentioned those challenges, what are some of the challenges that you saw?
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge is teacher and leader development, finding and forming good teachers and good leaders. I think there is an urgent need to develop a leadership pipeline, and I think one of the biggest challenges in that is not just finding the leaders, but finding leaders who understand the faith, and who are willing to continue their formation in the faith, so that they're not just good academic leaders or operational leaders, but really good faith leaders. And I think that's a challenge for a lot of dioceses around the country, to find leaders and to find teachers. It's interesting, though. I think people are being creative in how they're addressing that challenge. And again, sometimes you might expect, well, people will settle. But a lot of superintendents and a lot of principals are refusing to settle, and instead saying, can't we be creative in how we approach this? And maybe the traditional model of what was required of a teacher or administrator, we could look at a little differently.
Yeah, Steve, it's been really fun kind of getting to know you and working with you. We had the opportunity to spend a day together when you visited Diocese of Orange last February, and now I work on the President's Advisory Council. So it's been really kind of neat to see the evolution of NCEA under your leadership. Can you share just a little bit about how, quite honestly, you're kind of shaking things up and really serving schools in a way that that is relevant to them at this point?
Thank you. I think my biggest concern when I took on this role, and it's one of the reasons why I did do that traveling, so I could really get to understand what the needs were, is I have one perspective of what the needs are as a superintendent, as a former superintendent, as a Catholic school principal. But that doesn't mean that's what everybody needs around the country. And trying to make sure that we serve and meet as many of those needs as possible. I would say if I had to categorize my goal, it's moving NCA from a place where you go for resource and a place where you come together to go to workshops or meet people, to take it from that and expand the notion of what we can do, to really look at, instead of just collecting data, for example, really looking strategically at data and giving that data back to superintendents and to school leaders in ways that are helpful, in ways that are meaningful. We're in the process of developing this new data dashboard that will take every piece of data we can get our hands on and put it into a data warehouse that is accessible, and that is sort of user friendly, and allows the person with access to that data to really look for good trends, look at regional trends, national trends, and more local trends, everything from enrollment up to salaries, things like that. So I think that's an example of just, we used to collect data and put it in a PDF and share it out. Now we're looking to collect more data, but make sure that it's usable, and presented in a way that is helpful. And I think that's just one example. I think one of the biggest challenges we see in schools, besides the teacher administrator shortage, is how we ensure operational vitality into the future. And so we're taking some big swings in the next, over the next 2 years, on how we help school leaders develop those skills. Most of us went to your traditional universities where we learned how to be educational leaders, but we were not necessarily formed and really well developed in some of the other areas of
Right.
operational vitality. A principal is kind of like a mini superintendent in a lot of ways if you compare it to the
Yeah.
public school, and there's a lot of skills that they need that just aren't in the curriculum. So we're trying to really look at what those needs are and be agile in how we respond to them. We're also redoing our acre assessment to provide better data that is more useful, and really to move beyond just providing data back on what students know from that assessment of knowledge, Catholic knowledge. Just in the past, it was sort of, well, this is how they performed. And it was really done by class, and you couldn't really dig too deep. And it was offered a couple of times during the course of their time, 3 times at most, to a system where they can look at every student every year starting in second grade, so that they could really look at student growth and better inform what the teacher's doing in the classroom. So it drives not only the students' formation and development, but the teacher's formation and development. So I think that's another thing where we heard a need, and we're trying to respond to that.
Great.
Steve, when you were traveling around or in your role as superintendent, have you seen or can share with our listeners evolving governance trends, models? I'm on the board of the Christ Rey Institute, which is the juridic person sponsoring 3 of the Christ Rey schools, including the one in Erin's diocese, which is an innovative way for lay people and religious to collaborate and ensure the sponsorship. But are you seeing any other trends or new ideas that jump out at you around governance?
Yeah, I wouldn't say they're necessarily a lot of new ideas. Rather, trying to relook at or reimagine some of the ways that some of the ideas that have come up in the past, but try to do a better job at it, at implementing it maybe.
Yeah.
So things like consolidation, right? You don't, instead of just closing schools or merging schools, really looking at a region more carefully. And I would say the biggest difference is people are taking a much closer look at demographics and trends and what the future looks like, and digging into or at least trying as best they can, digging into each of the facilities and digging into the needs that people have in terms of transportation, and trying to look at governance structures that relieve some of the administrative burden at each school, so that some of that could become part of a wider infrastructure. And I would say that part is probably more of a modern trend, I think. I know in the past I've seen a couple of schools that have come together and merged and united under one governance structure. But I think we're seeing a lot more of that, particularly in urban and rural settings where the and in different ways. Obviously, the way you would do it in urban setting is very different than a rural setting. But looking at ways to relieve some of the work of the principal, so that they can focus on being the faith and the academic leader and not have to worry about balancing the books every day, right? So trying to centralize some of that back office infrastructure to take the stress off of the schools. So I think that's certainly an innovative approach that I'm seeing a lot more of. The other thing I would say, so for example, I serve as a board member on the School Sisters of Notre Dame of I think it's the Northeast, I forget which is which, Northeast province, I think it is. And one of the things they've looked at is how do we support our sponsored ministries in a different way as we move, to more of lay governance. How do we ensure that charism is carried on to the next generation? And so the School Sisters of Notre Dame or Notre Dame, depending on where you are in the country and who you ask, or which school you're at, they've created this two-tiered board of limited jurisdictions to oversee all of their sponsored ministries. It's been interesting as they just did it. They started it right before I left Bridgeport. So as one of the sort of founding board members, it's interesting to see that develop and some of the challenges of being in the middle of that. I use the word challenge, but it really is, I think, a great opportunity to sort of answer those challenges, to ensure that schools have the support they need and they feel supported by the order, and also that the charism is carried out, while still giving them probably a little more freedom, perhaps, in terms of the management, if that makes sense. And it's unfortunate in that it in one sense creates a degree of separation from the order a little bit, but the connection, I think, is deeper because there are just fewer sisters to do the work and be involved. So by encouraging lay people who can share that charism and ensure that charism stays alive while still bringing some professional competencies to the role, I think that it actually strengthens them into the future.
I had an old Jesuit friend who once said that as more lay people got into leadership in Jesuit schools, the schools became more Ignatian because they had to be. The old days, they were Jesuit because you had 40 Jesuits walking around the clerics. Now you have 2, and so the intentionality of lay leaders to keep the charism alive has been I think a very positive movement in that direction.
Yeah, and I think that's the key word, the intentionality. That's a very key word. Yeah.
We're going to take a quick pause and get a word from our sponsors.
The Next Class 2.0 is proudly sponsored by Catholic Education Services and ILE, 2 organizations committed to supporting Catholic schools and their leaders. Catholic Education Services, formerly Catholic Virtual, partners with Catholic schools to deliver online education services, including expanding course offerings, filling teacher openings, and creating alternative learning options. Learn more at CatholicEducationServices.com. ILE, the Institute for Leadership and Entrepreneurship in Education, offers Catholic school leaders a unique professional community for spiritual formation, leadership development, and renewal. Discover more at ileconnect.org. That's ileconnect.org. Together, we're helping Catholic schools thrive today and lead with vision for tomorrow.
Erin, do you want to pick it up?
Yeah. So Steve, I wanted to circle back. You talked a little bit about some of these bright spots on your nationwide tour, and enrollment was one of them. I know here, locally in the Diocese of Orange, we're seeing flat enrollment, but what are you seeing nationwide, and what's the data telling us?
So I think the data is telling us a good story, and that growth and enrollment is relatively stable. Um, uh, I think this year we're still waiting on a couple of dioceses, or a couple of schools within dioceses to hand in
Okay.
their data. So we're at like high 90s in terms of percentage of schools reporting, but so far we're less than 0.5% change in enrollment,
Okay.
which is amazing. To think where we were and where we
Right.
are, to see that dip is slight. But what's, I think, more positive is that almost half of the dioceses who've reported have reported increased enrollment. So just under 50% have shown some level of growth at their schools, even with consolidation or reorganization, trying to use resources more wisely, I think, to go
Okay.
back to that earlier question of some of
Yep.
the governance structures. But the reality is, I think people expected post pandemic for enrollment to drop
Hmm.
once everybody could go back to school, back to their public school. And
Right.
that
Right.
didn't happen. Instead, people liked what they saw, and they decided to stay. And as I mentioned earlier, schools took advantage of that, and really focused on growth. So the good news is we're relatively stable. There are obviously, if you look at places that have school choice, you're
Hmm.
seeing tremendous growth,
Okay.
which is good. Where you're seeing the most, or I should say, sharpest declines, are in some of the large urban areas. Coincidentally, or I guess not coincidentally, I should say, that's also where you're seeing a lot of people move out. So, as
Sure.
as you all remember, during COVID and right after COVID, a
Hmm.
lot of people left the cities, left living in the city and moved out to the suburbs. So in those large urban centers, you're seeing a decline, but in the suburbs surrounding them, you're seeing either an increase or stability as people
Okay.
come in. And one of the key metrics we look at is, are the kindergartners replacing the eighth graders, right?
Mhm.
So
Right.
it's one thing to grow in different places, but you want to just make sure that cycle is continuing on.
Sure.
And we are seeing actual growth in the early childhood and kindergarten grades in a lot of places, not everywhere, but in a lot of places. So that's really good signs. I think, the federal tax credit, if that goes through, I think
Sure.
is a step in helping the future uh, possibilities, and at least changes, hopefully, the conversation. Because certainly, what we're seeing is that when affordability is not the issue, enrollment grows.
Yeah. Look
Okay.
at Florida. I mean,
Yeah.
Florida is a great example where those guys are they're booming down there.
Yeah.
Have you done, or are you going to do a study on that impact? Like, is the growth happening in voucher states exclusively? Is it happening outside of those, and why?
Yeah, it isn't happening exclusively in those states. Obviously, the biggest growth is there, but there is some spread beyond that. in many cases, it's suburbs surrounding the urban centers, as I mentioned. We are going to do some work in researching that, both through our university partners, and also just today we announced a new hire for NCEA. We just hired a new director of research and data, Dr. Kyle Lee, who's superintendent of Lexington, Kentucky. He will come on as our new director of research and data and work with the universities and with other partners to do research in areas such as this.
Yeah.
There's so many things to look at, so many variables to study.
Right. But I think, again, the important thing, those partners, right? And as you said, our higher ed partners are a huge resource for us that we need to make sure that we're partnering with them to support this good, work in K-12 that will affect what they do in higher ed. So that's great. One of the things that you had mentioned also is that kind of post-pandemic, instead of diluting Catholic identity, what you've observed is schools and dioceses really kind of doubling down on that mission and Catholic identity. What does that look like in practice today? Particularly as our schools are becoming even more diverse.
Yeah, I think what impresses me, not a direct answer to your question, but hopefully I'll get there. But what impresses me is the balance of the pastoral approach that schools have when dealing with people from different faiths or people who believe certain things differently. While they deal with them pastorally, at the same time, they don't dilute who they are and what they stand for. And I think it's a hard challenge, but one that many schools are really doing when left to do it pastorally and in a way that is appropriate to their community. They've really risen to the occasion and done a great job. I think in terms of what does it look like, anyone who's ever walked into a Catholic school can almost immediately tell the difference if Catholic identity is alive. And I don't mean just by seeing symbols, right? It's not the cross on the wall or the picture or the stained glass. It's really the interaction that you see of the people within the building. It's the way that they greet each other, the way that they speak to each other. It's what you see around the classroom, the conversations around virtue. Even something as succinct of the distinction between, a values-based education and a virtues-based education. Simple things like that, and the language that people use instantly indicates sort of how Catholic identity is woven throughout the curriculum. When you hear students talk about service projects in a way that includes some sort of theological reflection or some sort of thought about, how this is really living out the gospel, as opposed to I had to do 12 hours of community service for this reason, right? Those are all simple things that tell you, that Catholic identity is woven intentionally into everything that happens in a school. And it's one of those things, sometimes it's hard to quantify and check that box, but you certainly can feel it and see it. Again, so much is observed by the interaction. When I was principal, I could walk into a classroom and know if the teacher was putting on a show, right? Or if this is what always happened. When I was in the diocesan office, I could walk down the hall with a principal, and just by the way the students responded to that person, I could tell a lot. The same is true for Catholic identity. You can tell when that is intentionally woven in.
That's great, Steve. Before we head into some fun closing questions for you, I think we'd be remiss not to talk about technology, AI, online learning. The provost at Seattle University recently said that if a high school doesn't offer online courses, they can't call themselves college prep. 50% of higher ed is delivered online now. AI is the topic of every conference we go to. We'd love to just give you a chance to talk a little bit about your views on technology, AI, and we could do a whole nother podcast on this, so I recognize that. But wanted to give you a chance to share with our listeners your thoughts on AI, technology, online learning, and Catholic education today.
Yeah, I think first off, to go directly to the statement, I mostly agree with that in the sense that I think creating students with a sense of digital literacy is extremely important before they go to the university. So I think that's one reason I would agree with that. I also think there are sometimes people who say let's totally avoid it and let's not even talk. Let's leave it out of the classroom. They have enough of it at home. We don't need to address it. The reality is they're not using it correctly at home often. So, we have a responsibility, I would say a moral responsibility, to teach young people how to use technology in a way that is ethical, in a way that is moral, and in a way that, doesn't lead them down a path that we don't want them to go down, right? We have to we have to give them the guardrails, because if we don't give them the guardrails, we all know what happens. We all know what could happen. So I'm not saying technology has to be everywhere in a school and it has to be all about technology, but I think we can't ignore it either. So I would add that. And then I would also, I think the third thing I would say, the ability to integrate technology and what's out there, whether it be through online courses or even just research, opening that world up to young people is extremely important. Not only does it allow young people to take courses that they might not otherwise be able to take, but it allows them experiences that they may never have. Now, granted, it may not be the same as the real experience, like visiting a place, right? The virtual experience isn't the same as the real. It gives them an experience, right? That hopefully there'll come a time where they'll have the opportunity to experience it in real life because they've been exposed to it, and it's now something that the sort of the fire's been lit within them to explore further. So I would agree for those three reasons. I would agree with it. I do think we have to be really careful in ensuring the humanity, right, at the school level. And I think, the Pope just talked about that. I had the opportunity to be at the youth ministry conference where the Pope dialogued with young people. And it was incredible to watch. But, I was inspired by his message of, we can't ignore it, but we have to ensure humanity and use it as a tool, just like everything else. The key is developing those guardrails, which is hard when something changes every 5 minutes, right? So that's the challenge with AI, with other things with other technologies, is that it's just exponential, the growth, and so I think that's the scary part.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting. I gave a talk to the presidents and principals of the Christian Brothers schools 2.5 years ago, and I asked how many of them were using AI. So 50 or so administrators, one hand went up. I spoke to a group of principals about 3 weeks ago in a very rural district, about 25 principals and presidents. When I asked the question, every hand went up. When I said, how many of you use it weekly? They all stayed up. How many of you use it daily? They almost all stayed up. So to your point, it's here, and it's great to see them, these administrators using it, because you got to use it if you're going to teach it. And how do you build the guardrails if you aren't using it? So good comment, Steve. Appreciate that perspective. Okay, Erin, Steve's busy, but we got some fun questions here at the end. Do you want to take a stab at one of them?
Yeah. So, Steve, I'd love for you to share maybe your favorite Catholic school memory. This could be either as a student or a teacher or principal, but yeah, favorite Catholic school memory to share with the audience.
Yeah. So when I was in 10th grade, I had Sister Mary Donald was my English teacher.
Where was this?
And this was at Mercy High School in Riverhead on Long Island in New York.
Okay.
So I was 10th grader, English lit. She called us up to get our tests. And I walked up and she handed me my test. I walked back, I got an 85. And I was so excited I got an 85. And of course, I'm walking back to my seat as a 10th grader, like, yes, I got an 85. And I sit back down and she goes like this, Mr. Cheeseman, come up here. The finger, she walks, sends me outside. So I'm standing outside. I'm like, what did I do? All right, I guess I talked. I shouldn't have talked, whatever. Sister came outside and she got right in my face and she said, don't ever settle for 85%. You are so much better than
Uh,
85%. And that has stuck with me
mm,
my entire life. Do not settle for 85%. And it's a message I've tried to share with my students over time is that,
mhm.
you can do better and you shouldn't be happy about that. You should always be just trying to do better. Interesting. Same story. Now, same sister. Fast forward a bunch of years. I'm now principal of the same school. She's she is no longer in the classroom. She's down in guidance, and
Uh-huh.
I am walking the hall as a principal. She's walking towards me, and this freshman comes buzzing by me, running to class, and she stops him, and she says, "We don't run. Go back, turn around, and walk." So the freshman turns around, walks a lot. I felt so bad. Now I stopped in my tracks because there is no way I'm getting involved in this conversation. So I just stop in my tracks and let sister handle it. Student walks back and she says, "That was better, but I think you can do better. Go back and do it again." Kid goes back, walks back. She's like, he comes back and so one more time. Makes him go back, does it again for a
Wow.
third time, makes him walk down the hallway. She says, now you can go to class. Now you may go to class. She says. So he goes on. I now resume walking, and she walks. And as she passes, she leans over and she just says, just wanted to see if I still had it in me. And she keeps on walking. And I said, sister, you will always have it in you. Even I stopped, and I was going to turn back and walk around.
Uh, uh,
Oh, that's yeah. What are those giants in Catholic education, right?
Yeah.
We stand on the shoulders of giants, and yeah, what a great story. Thank you.
that was great. Another one of these rapid fire ones for you. What is one book that every Catholic school leader should read this year?
So I'm going to give you sort of a more popular one, but I think a baseline one, right? I think a basic book that every Catholic school teacher should read is the Holy See's Teaching on Catholic Schools,
Mm,
where it talks about the five essential marks of a Catholic school. So I would say if you haven't read that, you should read that. That's really important. And then more modern, there's a couple. Um, about 6 months ago, I read, actually, that was probably a year ago, Birdsell's book on, what was it called? It's about bringing Catholic education into every classroom. Um, Educating for Eternity, I think is the name of it.
yeah.
That was a really good book about how you can bring Catholic education into everything. And then Jeanette Bozeman and Michael. What's his name? Michael Boyle,
Well,
just
yeah.
put out a book, Unique and Unrepeatable. Great book about, the dignity of every child and creating education that serves every child, no matter their learning style, their learning needs, but how we can serve all God's children. I think both of those are great, great reads.
Mike is doing some amazing work around Catholic education inclusivity. So highly recommend our listeners check out St. Louis University and some of the work Mike is doing there. I think it's remarkable what he's been.
Yeah, he's doing it. He's doing incredible work, and we just we put together just recently this task force on serving students with special needs, because there are people like Michael who are doing incredible work, and my thought is we don't need to replicate that, but we need to put our arms
Right.
around it and
Yeah.
make sure that everybody knows
Yes.
what these resources are.
Yeah.
So of course Michael is certainly on this task force, and along with some other people and university partners and other experts in the field who are just doing incredible work. And again, I think that goes back to the evolution of NCEA, is we don't need to do everything, but we need to be, as sort of the national voice for Catholic education, we need to be able to put our arms around it and be able to point people in the right direction, so that when there's a need, we can direct them to someone who can support them if it's not us.
Yeah.
Love that. Well, Steve, thank you for joining us today. And we ask all of our listeners one final question, which we didn't prompt you with. And so our listeners will know what's coming. But who is your greatest teacher and why?
Besides the one I talked about earlier, I would say my greatest teacher was a woman named Gloria Martinez. And the reason she was the greatest teacher is I could never understand how she did this. I had her in the morning and I had her in the afternoon, and she was always incredibly enthusiastic, incredibly like all she cared about was you learning and how you were doing, and your she cared about your mental health long before that was a thing, making sure that you were good. Talk about educating the whole child. She was a gift to education, and certainly Catholic education. But I had her a couple of times during the course of my high school career, both for religion and for sociology, and had a for sociology and I think a psychology course. But an amazing woman who gave 110%, even though I know that's not possible, but gave everything she could to her students, and really cared about their success.
Great. Well, Steve, thank you for joining us. We're going to let you go while Erin and I wrap this up here. But for our listeners, ncea.org to learn more about your organization. And we're excited to have you leading the ship with those ships right behind you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks,
This has been
Steve.
great. I
Yeah.
appreciate the opportunity to chat. Thanks.
Okay. Look forward to seeing you soon. Thanks, Steve.
Thanks. Bye.
Well, Erin, thank you for setting that up. That was a fun conversation. I had never met Steve and really enjoyed the conversation.
Yeah, he brings, again, just such real life experience to his role, and I think just this openness to learn and to serve Catholic education in the best way possible. So, like I said, it's been inspiring to kind of witness his leadership, but also to support him in that as well.
I was also impressed. I got a sense of real humility in the role.
Yes.
A servant leader is the sense I got from him, having never met him before, but I appreciated that. And as Carlos said, his stories were great.
Yeah. No, he's great. He's a great storyteller. And I loved that final story about the sister, both as a student and then again as the principal. That was so funny.
Yeah. But the one as a student, wow, what a powerful one that I hope those listeners that are still in the classroom, you can model that, take that one and steal it.
Absolutely.
All right, Erin, any final thoughts?
No, again, I just I think that as Catholic educators and leaders, I think that it's a really exciting time to be in Catholic education, and there are some bright lights, amidst the darkness, and I think it's just a great reminder that we are called to be those beacons of light and during these challenging times. So again, really, really inspiring to hear that from a national perspective.
Absolutely. And on the Feast of St. John Newman, Kind of
That's
fun
right.
to have this conversation
Yep.
on the feast day. Again, for our listeners, today is January 5th, the feast of St. John Newman, and may he continue to pray for us. And Carlos, always want to thank you for being the wonderful producer, the magic behind the wall. Glad you came out from behind the wall to see us. To our listeners, thank you for indulging us for the past hour or so. And if you enjoyed this, as always, if you could like it, share it, and we look forward to seeing you again at the next class.